Paul McCartney had lost everything. His bank accounts were drained. His financial advisors shrugged in defeat. His investors vanished, leaving behind nothing but fraudulent schemes and a legal disaster. The sums were staggering. Tens of millions gone. And no one understood how it had happened. People who had known Paul for years were stunned. He wasn't 17 anymore. He wasn't some naive kid just stepping into the music industry. He was Paul McCartney, a living legend, a man who had survived countless rises and falls, built an empire, and outmaneuvered every trap the industry had ever set. And yet, he said nothing. And that was the strangest part. Instead of fighting back, suing, exposing the con artists, he simply walked away. No statements. No attempts to recover the money. It didn't make sense. Some called him a fool. Others said he had lost his edge. But no one saw the bigger picture. Because this wasn't a story of defeat. This was a story about something much, much bigger. And the truth was about to surface. Paul McCartney had always known that the best melodies are born in silence. They don't come under the spotlight. They don't come with the roar of an audience. They live in rooms with out-of-tune pianos, in garages where a lamp replaces a microphone, in the hearts of people who don't yet know if they'll ever be heard. Once, he was one of them. A long time ago, before he was a star, music lived inside him as something fragile, delicate. In a small house in Liverpool, he had sat with his old guitar, playing chords, not knowing that history was waiting for him. But some never got their chance. And he remembered every name. The boys who dreamed of the stage but never found their song. The ones who gave up before the world could listen. One of them was named Danny Kaye. Danny had a voice that could cut through the cold. He never studied music, couldn't read notes. But when he sang, even the gray Liverpool air seemed to soften. He could have been someone. But he wasn't. He disappeared before music ever led Paul to the Beatles. One night in a basement. One melody that never made it to the radio. And then nothing. Paul had heard it. And it was incredible. It was a universe contained in a few notes. And it became the foundation of what the world would later hear in the Beatles. The depth. The hidden meanings. The execution. It wasn't theft. It was catharsis. A creative explosion inside an artist who took that moment and built an entire world of music. From that night on, he never saw Danny again. His name was never written in history. And Paul never knew what had happened to him. It haunted him. Because he always felt that he owed something. He had moved forward while someone else had stayed behind. He had found success while someone else lost their music. Years later, he sat in a darkened studio. A room filled with kids strumming old guitars, fumbling through chords, trying to find their voices. He listened to them without stepping into the light. They didn't know he was there. No one had taught them how to chase fame. No one had given them a shortcut to the stage. But still, they sang. And he knew that some of them could be what Danny Kaye never had the chance to be. He knew he couldn't watch talent disappear anymore. And so he made a decision. This time, he wouldn't walk away alone. He would stay, to give a chance to those no one else would notice. But to do that, he had to do something that no one would understand. No one understood why Paul McCartney stayed silent while his name was dragged through the mud. He had lost everything, or at least, that's what the world believed. They called him naive. Said he was too old to understand how the world worked. That he had been scammed, tricked into losing tens of millions to fraudsters. But the truth was far more complicated. Because he had given that money away himself. He hadn't just wired the funds. He had created something that would outlive him. A fund that didn't exist on paper. A fund with no name. The money didn't go into one massive project that could be unveiled under bright lights and camera flashes. It went into hundreds of small rooms where music was being born in silence. To old studios on the verge of shutting down. To instruments that struggling kids could never afford. To voices that might have never been heard. Thousands of people got a chance. And none of them knew where it came from. Some might have asked why. Why sacrifice his name, his fortune, his reputation? But he had always known the answer. Because he remembered that voice in the basement of Liverpool. He remembered the boy who never got to sing for the world. Danny Kaye. Paul never found out what happened to him. If that song they had played together in the dark still existed. But now, it didn't matter anymore. Because he had done what he was meant to do. He had given a chance to those who might become the next. And he didn't need anyone to know. Because music doesn't need names. It just needs to live.